So far too many people spend ages trying to get their tuning absolutely perfect. I want to explain why this probably isn't necessary and what the real important areas are and why I don't worry about tuning as much as you might think. So that's exactly what this video is going to be all about. So when it comes to tuning, I basically do poundage, tiller, get those correct, limb alignment, then I do a basic tune with the bow, make sure, as I've said many times before, bow poundage, arrow spine and arrow length are matched, so you've got a good basic tune. I do all of this with the button for a biter button set at 6.0 on the normal spring that it comes with. So leave the button, set it with the poundage, arrow length, arrow spine. Then, because I've changed the poundage, I just simply check the limb alignment again, check the tiller again. That's it, done. That is your basic setup done. And what you basically have done here is matched your arrow to your bow. You've got a good general setup. You've made sure everything's straight. When the string is going down, it's hitting straight, all that kind of stuff. It's all good. But I see loads and loads of archers spending huge amounts of time, playing with their button, seeing if, another half turn on center shot is going to improve this, or another half turn on the button tension, taking a click off here, click off there, which can be tempting with the biter button because it's really easy to do a click or whatever. But I see a lot of people spending ages and ages on this, or, they're not absolutely happy with their limb alignment, so they tweak it a tiny bit one way, tweak it a tiny bit the other way, that kind of thing. But I don't worry about this much tuning. Tuning doesn't make as much of a difference as you think, especially if you're not at maybe 660, 670 level at a 720 round. The tuning, the fine tuning is not going to make a big difference for you, because a tiny change in your technique with your fingers, with your bow grip, with your string contact on your chin is going to make a much, much bigger impact on your tuning than clicking a few extra clicks on the button, or changing a brace height 2 millimeters. So I would much rather get the basic setup, and this is how I do it. I get a basic setup, and then I don't really worry about the micro tuning until I'm at 70 meters and I'm nearing competition, competition dates. Then I'll do some micro tuning, maybe a couple of weeks out, and do this. But that's because I'm at that level where it's actually, relevant. If you're not getting those scores yet, it's just a waste of time. It's much better to focus on technique and, really nailing this down. Spend the time on technique, visualization, gym work, or whatever. It's much more productive. So I would definitely encourage that, and I want to go through the real priorities now of that tuning. So like I said before, the basic setup is good enough. Like I said, you want knock fit, make sure that's good. Obviously, tiller, poundage, limb alignment, that's your kind of basic setup. And then you match the arrow spine, arrow length, that kind of thing. That's great. But, so these are the real priorities. But once that's set, once that's good, what should you focus on, rather than doing micro tuning and stuff like that? Say if micro tuning, maybe say if you shoot 620 on a 720, what should you be focusing on? Don't worry about the micro tuning. Worry about things that are going to have a much bigger impact. Worry about keeping your tab in good shape. Regularly changing the leather on your tab. Regularly checking and changing your nocks. So arrows, having your set of arrows, as closely matched as possible is one of the biggest overlooked things probably that I ever see, because, people get the set of arrows, they're great when they come new, they've got the set of arrows, and then they spend time, all this time micro tuning, but in that time, one of the points is bent, they've shot a couple of the arrows, so the back's bent in a couple of the arrows, they've got torn fletches, a couple of the nocks have got, dents in them, but they should be all right, yeah? So, they've got this kind of mismatched set of arrows, and it's really not very good. They'll be shooting and wonder why, each end they might have one dodgy arrow, but it's probably them. But it turns out it's the arrow because, the nock's bent and it's flying funny. Stuff like this is so overlooked. So I definitely encourage that time that you would maybe think is micro tuning, spend it on making sure make sure you've got new string with good center serving, good knocking points where the arrow is not moving around. And then finally, your arrow consistency is probably the biggest thing. I would much rather people spend money on, and also, time on making sure the arrows are good. So, if you're thinking of buying a new sight or something, providing you've got a decent sight already, the money is much better spent on getting arrows, getting a new set of arrows, or getting new nocks or something, or replacing the pins. So on your set of arrows, what do you make sure of? Make sure, obviously, that they're all fletched perfectly. It makes a huge difference, and I mean perfectly. If you've got torn fletches, people say, oh, it doesn't matter. It does. So make sure they're fletched perfectly, and if you tear one, replace it, fletch it, especially if it's a competition. Nocks. Never shoot nocks with dents in, dinks in, bent nocks, tiny marks on them. Just don't shoot them. If you shoot pins, always replace the pin as well as the nock. If the pin has got a dent in it, some people just kind of file it away and put a new nock on, and that's fine. Replace the pin, new nock. I understand that's expensive, but a lot of the time you could maybe, in practice, if you're shooting blank boss, maybe it's okay to shoot the pin with the dent in, but when you're in a competition, you want to make sure you've replaced that and you've got brand new pins, new nocks, all good. So yeah, check the nocks, check the pins, check the fletches, check any cracks, regularly check bare shaft, shoot 30 meters as you've got a set of arrows, maybe once a month, defletch all of them, shoot them all at 30 meters or some distance that you're confident you can keep everything in the gold, shoot them all at that distance. They should all group within the gold. If your normal group is within the gold, with the bare shafts, it should be pretty similar. Do that every month. And then you might spot there's some flyers there. There's some arrows that have gone bad for some reason, whatever that is, and you shouldn't be shooting those anymore in competition. Stuff like this is much, much better to spend the time on than worrying about micro tuning that doesn't really have any impact. So really focus down on these key details. As I said before as well, make sure that your string is good. Make sure you've got a new string. It doesn't have to be obviously brand new, but make sure that it's not overly worn out, it's not gone fluffy. Make sure the center serving is good. Make sure the nock fit is still good. Knocking points, stuff like this, there are easy points, and having a good string, good consistent nock fit, stuff like that is really, really important. So always check that and regularly change your string. If you're shooting, for example, I'll make up a number here. If you're shooting maybe 200-300 arrows a day and you're shooting every day, then you probably, ideally, you would want a new string every month. So obviously you can adjust that for how often you shoot, so let's say 300 arrows a day, 30 days in a month, that's 9,000 arrows. So after maybe 9,000 arrows, you might want a new string. So if you only shoot 100 arrows a day, then you just adjust that after 3 months. So, make sure that your equipment is maintained well, rather than just focusing on setting it up with micro tuning and then just leaving it forever. It's more about the maintenance of the things that matter, rather than just wasting time on micro tuning that's not gonna help you. So that's where I place the real priorities there. Some of the other priorities that you should think about are customizing your grip and your tab. Again, often I see archers spending a huge amount of time micro tuning for their button and stuff, but when you ask, okay, why haven't you tried to modify your grip and improve it by using some milliput or something, you say, oh, it takes too long. Well, that time that you were doing micro tuning is actually much better spent finding through, yes, it takes a lot of trial and error, making a grip is annoying and it takes forever, but if you do that and you'll go through maybe 5, 10, 15 slightly different modifications of your grip, you'll find one that fits your hand much better and you'll get a much better reaction, and that's half of your shot that's in permanent contact with your bow. Your hand is always contacting the bow and has a huge impact on the tuning, the consistency of the arrow, the clearance, all that kind of stuff is much more important than micro tuning or distance tuning or whatever. So I'd much rather people focus on that, on their tab, making sure the clearance between the nock is good with the leather. All this kind of stuff is still equipment, but it's much more important than, like I said, micro tuning. So I just wanted to highlight those areas and make sure what the real priorities are. So it comes to basic setup and equipment maintenance, those are the really, really important parts. So that's been a complete overview of what is important when it comes to equipment and why I don't worry about the fine tuning too much. I spend more time on other parts of equipment than maybe a lot of archers or coaches would think. So I hope you found that video useful. As always, be sure to smash that like button, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll also leave the links to social media down below, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.